The fluorescent lights of Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport hummed with a chaotic energy. For U.S. Army Specialist Aaron Pearson, it was the finish line. After 14 months as a combat medic in the dust and tension of Syria, the air, thick with the smell of Cinnabon and floor cleaner, was the first American air he'd breathed. He was 24. But his eyes held the weary gravity of a man twice his age. All Pearson wanted was to make his connecting flight home to Virginia. He walked with purpose, his Army combat uniform crisp, despite the bone-deep exhaustion clinging to him. The colorful ribbons on his chest told a quiet story of courage and sacrifice. He was a son, a soldier, and a hero. But in the next 15 minutes, in the eyes of one man, he would be a target, and that man was about to make the biggest mistake of his life. Officer Frank Miller, a 15-year veteran of the Atlanta Police Department Airport Precinct, saw the world in shades of resentment. He walked the concourse like he owned it, viewing travelers as annoyances in his personal kingdom. His partner, Officer Davis, was younger and still had some of the idealism Miller had long since crushed in himself. Davis saw a bustling airport. Miller saw a cesspool of people who, in his mind, didn't belong. Miller had a history. 14 formal complaints for excessive force and discriminatory language had been filed against him, and 14 times his old academy buddy and supervisor, Captain Ronald Hurries, had dismissed them as unsubstantiated. This cozy arrangement gave Miller a sense of total impunity. His gaze swept across the crowd and landed on Specialist Pearson. Miller didn't see a soldier, he saw a costume. His mind, a brew of prejudice, had already written the script. "Look at this guy," Miller muttered to Davis, a sneer on his lips. "Plays dress-up, thinks he's a big shot." "Looks legit to me," Frank Davis replied, "just a soldier heading home." "It's my airport, my rules, my call," Miller retorted, his voice low and venomous. In his head, the pieces clicked into an ugly, familiar picture. A young black man in a uniform he couldn't possibly have earned. It was an accusation of stolen valor, a deeply insulting weapon perfect for a man who enjoyed the cruel power of humiliation. Meanwhile, another man was walking through the same terminal. He was in his late 50s, dressed in a simple civilian suit, and moved with a quiet command that made people part ways without thinking. This was General Caldwell, a 4-star U.S. Army general traveling incognito to a conference. He was also Aaron Pearson's commanding general, though they'd only met formally a few times. The general knew Pearson by his reputation, a brilliant medic, cool under fire, and respected by all. As Miller started toward Pearson like a shark sensing blood, General Caldwell was just a few paces behind, another unnoticed face in the crowd. The soldier, the bully, and the general were on a collision course. Pearson was checking the departures board when a sharp voice cut through the airport din. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" Pearson turned and saw 2 officers approaching. One had his hand resting on his sidearm in a casual show of intimidation. "Good morning, officers," Pearson said, his voice calm. "Is there a problem?" Officer Miller stepped into his personal space, his eyes raking over Pearson's uniform. "Problem? Yeah, I've got a problem with people playing make-believe in my airport." Pearson's brow furrowed. "I'm not sure I understand, officer." "You don't understand?" Miller scoffed, his voice getting louder. "I'm talking about that costume you're wearing. Where'd you get it?" "The surplus store." The accusation of stolen valor hung in the air. For a soldier, it was an insult that cut deeper than any wound. Still, Pearson kept his composure. "Sir, this is my duty uniform. I'm a specialist in the United States Army returning from deployment." "Oh, a specialist, are we?" Miller mocked. "Let me see your military ID." Now, Pearson deliberately reached into his pocket and produced his official Department of Defense ID. Miller snatched it from his hand, glanced at it for less than a second, and smirked. "This is a joke. A bad fake." Then he did something that crossed the line from harassment to assault. With a flick of his wrist, He threw Pearson's ID onto the dirty airport floor. A black man in a stolen uniform doesn't make you a soldier, Miller spat. The racism now laid bare. Pearson stared at his ID on the ground, a cold fire replacing the calm in his eyes. But before he could speak, Miller shoved him hard against a closed newsstand. Pearson's head hit the wall with a dull thud. "You don't belong here, boy," Miller growled, his face inches from Pearson's. A few yards away, unnoticed by Miller, General Caldwell stopped. He'd seen the whole thing. He watched the demand for ID, the demeaning toss of the card, and the shove. His calm expression vanished, replaced by something cold and hard. He didn't rush forward or shout. Instead, he pulled out his personal cell phone, pressed record, and framed the shot perfectly. The situation spiraled. Miller, fueled by his own rage, grabbed Pearson and forced him violently to his knees. Gasps rippled through the gathering crowd. Phones, once tentatively raised, were now up and recording from a dozen different angles. "You think this uniform makes you something?" Miller snarled, planting a knee firmly between Pearson's shoulder blades in a gesture of utter dominance. Pearson didn't struggle. He was trained to endure, and he knew fighting back would only give the officer the excuse he wanted. Officer Davis stood by, his face a mask of conflict. He knew this was wrong, but fear of his senior partner won out over his conscience. He did nothing. Just then, Captain Ronald Trace arrived, summoned by Davis. He took one look his favorite officer restraining a black man in a military uniform, and immediately took Miller's side. "What's going on, Frank?" Trace asked. This one was impersonating a soldier. Captain Miller lied, breathing heavily. "Became aggressive when I confronted him. Resisting." Her eyes nodded, not bothering to ask Pearson for his side. "Get him cuffed and take him to the substation." The crowd murmured in disbelief. One man shouted, "He didn't do anything." "We all saw it." Miller and our eyes ignored them. As Miller fumbled for his handcuffs, he laughed a short, ugly, triumphant sound. Throughout this entire spectacle, General Caldwell remained a silent observer, his phone still recording. He now had over 2 minutes of clear, damning evidence: Miller's lies, the captain's immediate complicity, and the handcuffs coming out. He knew it was time. He had documented not just one bigoted officer, but the systemic failure that enabled him. He stopped recording, uploaded the video to a secure military server, and began to walk forward with the chilling calm of a man about to bring an entire world crashing down. As Miller reached for Pearson's arms, a voice cut through the air. It wasn't loud, but it carried an authority so absolute it seemed to bend reality. "Officer, take your knee off my soldier." Miller looked up, annoyed. He saw an older man in a suit, a traveling businessman. "Mind your own business, pal," he snapped. "This is a police matter." "No," the voice replied, closer now. "This is a United States Army matter. I am General Caldwell, United States Army, and I am telling you for the last time, get off my soldier." The word general detonated in the concourse like a silent shockwave. Miller froze, his brain struggling to connect the man in the suit to the soldier on the floor. Captain High-Rise stepped forward. "Sir, I don't know who you think you are, but you need to back away." General Caldwell's eyes remained locked on Miller. "He claims stolen valor against a decorated combat medic from the 3rd Infantry Division, a soldier I have personally commended. Does that sound like stolen valor to you, Captain?" The specificity of the information was a wrecking ball to Miller's lie. I need to see some ID, sir," Miller stammered. "You're not in a position to ask for anything," Caldwell stated flatly, holding up his phone. "For the past 2 minutes and 37 seconds, I have been recording your conduct. I have you on high-definition video assaulting a uniformed service member. I have you using racially charged language, and I have you lying to your superior officer. This video has already been uploaded to a secure military server. It is now evidence in a federal investigation. The color drained from Miller's face. Reese looked like he'd been struck by lightning. "Officer Miller," Caldwell continued, his gaze terrifying, "your career ended the moment you threw that soldier's ID on the floor. You assumed this soldier was alone. You assumed no one who mattered was watching. You were wrong." As if on cue, two men in dark suits appeared, summoned by a single text from the general moments earlier. They were federal agents. One agent looked at HRI's. "Captain, we'll take it from here." The other looked at Miller, who was still frozen. "Get off of him." Now, slowly, mechanically, Frank Miller removed his knee and stood up, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning horror. He had picked a fight with a lone soldier, and an army had answered. The aftermath was a quiet, efficient dismantling of power. Miller and a trembling Davis were instructed to hand over their badges and guns before being escorted away by federal agents. Captain A. Dries stood paralyzed, ignored. He was no longer a person of authority. He was just another piece of evidence. General Caldwell knelt and placed a hand on Pearson's shoulder. "Son, are you all right?" Pearson slowly pushed himself up. "Sir, thank you." "There's nothing to thank me for, Specialist," Caldwell said, his voice softening. He picked up Pearson's ID from the floor, wiped it clean with his own handkerchief, and handed it back. "You upheld the Army's values under extreme provocation. I should be thanking you." The general, understanding the power of a story, ensured the video found its way to the right people. Within hours, Hartsfield Hero and #Justice for Pearson were trending. The official fallout was swift. Miller and Davis were suspended without pay. Captain Dries was also suspended, and an investigation was launched into the 14 prior complaints he had systematically buried. The U.S. Attorney's Office took the case. Frank Miller was indicted for willfully depriving Specialist Pearson of his civil rights under color of law, a serious federal charge. The video made proving his intent undeniable. Facing his own charges, Davis agreed to testify against both Miller and Dries. Frank Miller was facing the full weight of the justice system, his career in ruins. But for General Caldwell, a prison sentence wasn't enough. The insult to the uniform demanded a more personal, psychological response. Before we get to the final, devastating piece of karma, let us know in the comments. What's the appropriate punishment for an officer who abuses power like this? And if you believe in justice, subscribe for more stories like this. The trial was a national spectacle. The general's video left no room for doubt. Specialist Pearson testified with quiet dignity, and Officer Davis admitted to the cover-up. The jury saw the sneer on Miller's face, heard the venom in his voice, and recognized it as malice. Frank Miller was found guilty and sentenced to 10 years in a federal penitentiary, a sentence celebrated by those who saw it as long overdue justice. Captain Dries wasn't charged criminally, but his career was over. He was forced into dishonorable retirement, his pension stripped, and his name forever linked to the scandal. Specialist Pearson was officially commended. He finished his tour of duty, returned home, and with the general's encouragement, enrolled in a program to become an officer, his ordeal forging him into an even stronger leader. But for General Caldwell, one final message remained. 3 days after Miller was released on bail, he was at home when a sound began, a low rumble that grew exponentially louder. He went to his window and saw them, 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons, screaming over his neighborhood at an altitude that seemed to defy all logic and law. Flying so low over a congested residential area is a blatant violation of FAA regulations, which typically require a minimum altitude of 1,000 feet. These jets were far below that. They thundered directly over his house, and as they passed, the lead pilot broke the sound barrier. The resulting sonic boom was not a distant clap. It was an explosion of sound. The windows in Frank Miller's house groaned, and the largest one facing the street cracked from top to bottom. Panicked residents poured out of their homes, staring at the sky in terror. Miller was thrown back from the window, his ears ringing, he understood. This wasn't a mistake. This was an unauthorized, illegal, and completely deniable flyover. No one would ever prove a four-star general ordered it. But Miller knew. He knew the general had broken a dozen regulations to make a point. You messed with one of my soldiers. I command the sky. You thought your power was absolute. But there are levels of power you can't even comprehend. The story of Frank Miller and Specialist Pearson serves as a cautionary tale. While a dramatization, it's built on the painful truth of racial profiling and mistreatment that some service members endure. Miller's downfall was a reckoning for a system that protected him for too long. Justice, in this story, was served not just in a courtroom, but in the court of public opinion, and finally, delivered at the speed of sound. It's a powerful reminder that respect is a right, especially for those who risk everything to protect our own.